Going live. We're live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jeff Talk. So today we met for the final Jeff Talk of the year. Basically, our main idea today is to discuss what important happened in the field of the global education in 2022. What was significant trends, important events that need to be discussed, and also discuss what's ahead of us. So what's our plan and ideas for 2023? What are the global trends that's going to influence all of our world of global education and transformation of global education? And so today we're going to discuss it with the guests here in the so to say in our virtual panel, but also some of our colleagues and friends are going to join us. So we are totally welcoming our audience to participate actively as a contributor within this conversation as well. So let me first introduce our main speakers for today. This is Dr. Alexander Lasla, co-founder of Global Education Future, research director of Lasla Institute of New Paradigm Research, professor of system science and curated emergency, author of overall 100 journal, book, and encyclopedia publication, and much more. Hello, Alexander. Also, it's Dr. Pavel Luksha, founder of Global Education Future, the fellow of World Academy of Art and Science, and the co-author of several social movements and catalytic social change project. Hello, Pavel. And also Mr. Shiv Shukla, education and skills development specialist, as he humbly introduced himself, but we all know that Shiv is actually much more than how he humbly introduces himself. Hello, Shiv. And also we have some, I can see Olivier from Learning Planet here joining us, and also some guests, some other respective guests, and who are also probably going to join us later. So hello, everyone. Our dear speakers, please, do you want to welcome our audience as well? Maybe a few words from you from the beginning.
Thank you very much. And we just wanted to offer this moment to just, before we launch into everything, the conversation, the exploration, the looking back, the looking forward, and the gratitude and appreciation for what it is we have done and are doing, and the promise of things yet to come. This is our Gef Talk wrap today. I just wanted to take one moment to mark this time on the planet. This is a time of change. This is what we're going to be exploring a little bit today with you, but also right now, it is the solstice. I'm speaking to you from Buenos Aires, Argentina, where we are just about to enter summer. Today is the first day of summer, and we had already temperatures up to 38 degrees. It's starting to be quite warm. I have the fan going, and marking these times on our integral planet, one planet, but very different realities. How can we engage with each other in ways that are inclusive and learn to be in harmony with the seasons and with the time and with each other? So I'm going to invite us just to take very short, just 30 seconds, to close your eyes, to be here now. Thank you, my friends. That was a very quick settling and centering, but there's so much we have to share with you today. I'm going to pass it on now to Pavel.
Hello, and I'm really excited to be in this moment with this group of friends and colleagues also listening to us today. And the conversation we are about to have is the conversation to remember the last year and think about the next year in education. Of course, it's has been a very transformative year for the world. A lot has been changing. About 2 years ago, I have been presenting a small talk in the space of Learning Planet movement that was called 2020s, the Decisive Decade. And the idea of the talk was that we are entering a very interesting period of human history where a lot of things enter into very turbulent state. And that was felt already in the year 2 years ago. Now we lived through the last 2 years. We saw pandemics, we saw major international conflicts happening, we saw the disruption of existing market system and social security systems around the world. We saw tumbling down of governments around the planet, and we saw many challenges to existing way of being in our society. And that looks quite grim, let's say. There is a dark side to things that have been happening in the last year. There is a lot of grief about lives lost. There is a lot of grief about opportunities lost and collaborations lost to this very negative dynamics. And at the same time, we saw a lot of new things emerging. We saw positive changes coming up in social space and education space, a lot of very inspirational projects that have been happening in the last year. And we wanted to dedicate our conversation today to this idea of hope. Hope no matter what. Today is the longest night of the year. And some people say it's the darkest hours before the dawn. So maybe in some regard, we are not yet into the darkest hour, but we are into the moment when we can remember that ahead of us may come a difficult time. Next several years may be difficult, but we need to keep that hope no matter what, and the light will prevail. And that's my general message. And then I guess we should go into the conversation about what is actually happening, in what has been happening in 2022 and what is about to happen in 2023.
Thank you, Pavel. Shiv, please share a few words, just welcoming words with us as well.
Thank you and welcome, friends. And as a tradition from India, namaste to all of you. I'm very, very delighted to be part of this conversation. While I talk a lot of emotions. Actually, in the morning I was giving a talk. It was called Inside Outside. A lot of learning we had inside the classrooms, inside our closed door when we were in that pandemic period. A lot of introspection, reflections with families, with our own self. We have had those difficult moments also, like Pavel was sharing. The conflicts were happening, the pandemic was there, the students were suffering, the parents were suffering. I think in all this, there was a hope. There was an introspection of the transformation which can happen. We had a very great character in the history, in the historical journey of Indian mythology. The person was called Eklavya. I'll explain in a few seconds. So Eklavya was one of the characters in the great epic called Mahabharata. And while he was in that war with the Kauravas were the enemies. And Arjuna was very famous character. He was told that you have to be very focused on what do you want to achieve in life. So I think it's today I would want to sort of remember that character Eklavya, which was very clear in life that these are areas where we have to work upon, which are in our control. I think my message to all my friends in the room and the people who are watching on the YouTube also, that there are things which are in our control. And I think as a group, as a community, we should be focusing on those areas. I think rest can be taken care. We can pray for it. We can do our bit for it. So with that message, I think let's get into the main conversation. Kate, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shiv. So in the beginning, what I want to do, is I want to share with you very briefly the map that we created as a kind of as a template, as a framework for our conversation. And before our meeting today, we asked our respective audience, our respective listeners to share their ideas. So how they think, what shaped the global education in 2022, and of course, which topic they expect to be in the center of the conversation in 2023. But focusing on the first part of our conversation, which is going to be about the conclusions of the year, which is almost ended. So dear speakers, dear guests, here you can see some pickups. Again, it's not from the speakers yet, it's from the audience. So some of them were content related, basically speaking about the peace education, well-being, climate education, mental health aspects, and so on. Other were more format related, so to say. So there was a big conversation about the online education, artificial intelligence, how the digital transformation continues shaping and changing the world of global education. And of course, there was global trends and issues which Pavel mentioned, I think all of us mentioned, which continue basically influence all of the aspects of our life, including education, of course. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and pass to Pavel, actually. Pavel, what would be your pickups from the 2022? Would you name the main trend which shape in the world of education this year? Main lesson learned, probably.
Well, actually, the year was very complex, and there were obviously more than one trend shaping it up. So one thing I would like to mention, maybe before going to specific trends, is I think very positive news is that the need for a radical transformation of education has been recognized. I think it was very symbolic that this year in September, there was a UN summit dedicated to transformation of education. And there were many players from all over the world contributing to the ideas that were highlighted by the summit. And the idea that has been expressed there is that we cannot anymore expect that we will sort of fix education, like fix it here and there, keeping the existing model in place. We need radical transformation. We need education to become learner focused. We need it to become lifelong. We need to bring ecosystems into play. So the recognition is there. The role of educational innovation has been highlighted. And actually, it's clear that educational innovation driven by entrepreneurs, social change agents, universities, edtech companies, and many, many other players will flow into the system now. I think we are sort of reaching the critical mass, and more important, we are reaching the consensus among the stakeholders that this transformation is needed. So that's one thing that I think is positive. In terms of dark events that have been happening, of course, the war in Ukraine has been a major challenge and has highlighted to the world the idea that global peace cannot be taken for granted. But once this started to happen, people started to recognize that actually we need to begin educating for peace, that education plays a critical role in establishing peace worldwide. So peace-focused education is becoming a new trend very, very rapidly. There is a lot of demand for finding different solutions, and people also recognize that peace is not something that is made by politicians. It's actually something that needs to happen on the ground. It's peace in families. It's peace in communities. It's actually the relationship, the nonviolent communication that we can embrace and bring into our daily lives. So that has been really a focus of many educators that I observe around the world. Related to that, another topic that came up very, very strongly is the recognition that this kind of conflicts and at the same time challenges for us to break away from our patterns are blocked by what we call trauma. Trauma is something that comes from our past. It's those historical events and that kind of project into our lives. and block us from our ability to act in different ways. They reproduce these patterns of violence, these patterns of coercion, avoidance, disattachment, and many other things that do happen in daily lives. So the question, how do we break for them? And it's important that the recognition of trauma comes into education, and the idea that we need to learn how to relieve ourselves from trauma, how to heal ourselves. The process has to be collective, and education again plays critical role in doing that. And I can see that this topic is not anymore, let's say, staying on the margins of conversation. It really goes into the very center of conversation about the future of education. Another topic related to that, and maybe I'm coming to the end of my hot list, but I think another thing that is really, really important is that we start to see the challenges of the transformation related to the flow of technology coming into education. There was a lot of enthusiasm about 10, 15 years ago about the ideas of online learning, using of new technologies. There still is a lot of that enthusiasm. But we also see that this new environment actually creates a new type of trauma, because we are not anymore living in the world as we used to live in. We are living in two parallel worlds: the real world and the, say, call it virtual world, online world, the digital world. And it creates enormous pressure on the next generation. A lot of people are struggling to cope with it, and many people are not able to cope. So the surge in mental health issues has been observed over the last 5-7 years, now very evidently attributed to the spread of digital solutions. So we need to become aware. It's not, let's say, doesn't mean that we need to stop proliferating digital technologies. It just need that we need to understand that it's like a double-edged sword. That recognition came into the system, and now people begin to learn how to handle it. What are the right habits? What are the right protocols? What are the right way to approach it? Be more concise about using of digital tools. So that's, I think, it's another very important topic. And I will let my colleagues maybe highlight a few more. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. Shiv, would you pick up from this moment in conversation?
Sure. I think important points highlighted by Pavel. I would want to touch upon 2-3 important areas. One, when we look at the trends which have emerged in especially in last 2 years' time, I would club 2 years because fundamentally those two were the disruptive years from the pandemic point of view. I feel the learners have changed a lot. What happens at times, we talk about institutional changes, we talk about how do we navigate the change from leadership side, but also the learners and their preferences have changed now. Just to give you one small data point, today on YouTube, we have a content of a day which, as an individual, it will take 7 years for me to complete a 1 day of YouTube content. I mean, look at the massive information which is available. Now, as a learner, I have access to all sort of information. So the institution itself, they're going to become a place where the validation of information knowledge will happen. And that's where the discussions have changed now. Especially if I talk about the Indian context, the institutions have literally struggled in last 2 years' time, fundamentally from 3 aspects. The curriculum which were prescribed, they are no more relevant for the future. I'll give you some examples. Pavel was talking about technology and technology penetration. I'd also add to it that how new areas have emerged. From education, we have moved towards edtech. From financial services, we have moved towards fintech. From agriculture services, we have moved towards agrotech. So technology has penetrated not just in the academic systems, but also from the demand side. From the employers, from the labor market side. That's a huge transformation which has happened, and perhaps the existing curriculum is not matching up to what's going to transform in next near future. That's one. Second is also the faculty training, the teacher development. That is again a big task with the entire globe is going to face, not just a massive country like India, but globally we have that challenge because what potentially the pandemic has done, it has literally exposed a major chunk of the teachers, not just in K-12 space, but higher education also, they are perhaps not ready for the disruption which have happened. Even before the pandemic, when we know as a Jeff, we have worked extensively on Industry 4.0, its impact. We have been talking about I 5.0 and how it's going to shape up. So that's the teacher education, teacher development by and large is something where the future trend and the past also we have been struggling. The third important aspect, and then I'll pass it on to you, Kate, is the parental socio-economic mental stress. See, what has happened that if I was coming from a background which not very perhaps financially well off family, suddenly this entire shift towards the hardware, technological hardware, there was a lot of pressure on the parental side also. And that's where I feel one of the emerging trends which occurred. I can give you one data point about India. The psychiatrist, they saw 63% more patient in India in last 2 years' time. And fundamentally, it happened because of the pressure which was there. Of course, the jobs were not there, but also the pressure that how do we cope up with this entire shift which has happened? I mean, everything is digitally. Everything is starting from an ebook. You have to buy a book, or through getting into online classes. So all those that mental emotional pressure also is something which we have seen in the past a couple of years time. I'll stop here. We can add later. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiv. And Alexander, please, your.
Thank you very much. So I will round out this part here, and we'll get some input and some feedback. So if you have any questions or comments on what you're hearing now from Pavel and from Shiv and from me, you can either share them with us in the chats or just be ready, because we're going to open this up for a little bit of interaction in a moment. What you're hearing from Pavel, what you're hearing from Shiv, represents really the core interests and concerns that Global Education Futures is grappling with. And the thing is that we're not doing this alone. This is not a think tank in isolation. Truly, Global Education Futures is exploring the issues of how can we learn to live meaningfully and beyond just sustainably, thrivably in our interdependent and interconnected world. So one of the things that we are clearly seeing from this past year, oh, by the way, I did want to mention here, just to pick up on something Pavel said, the longest night. Well, here in the Southern Hemisphere, it's the longest day. And it's just to be clear on that, we have the day starts today at 5:30 in the morning, the sunrise, and ends at 8 p.m. So we have that, and it's also part of this balancing on this planet, exactly that we're learning how to celebrate these time shifts in ways where one part is maybe going into hibernation and the other part is going into activity. This happens with individuals all the time, what Shiv was saying also about learning to work with the interests of the communities, of the students, and of the parents is becoming increasingly recognized. So let me mention just a few things here that we have learned from this past year from my perspective. One comes from the domain of the sciences, particularly systems science, complexity science, cybernetics. We look at complex adaptive systems, which is our planet and humans and other species living on it. And we are beginning to see, because of systems thinking becoming more in education, almost osmosis, by osmosis, less being a special subject area, but being a way of thinking and dealing with change, that we are living in a time of bifurcation. This bifurcation is often expressed as a bifurcation point, but it's a big time. It takes years, but we're right in that right now. During a time of bifurcation, it's hard to see what the outcome will be, because there's a potential for quantum leaps, for stochastic change, for something to happen that is nonlinear. This is exactly why our theme today is on hope. Because if anyone sits down and does a straight line extrapolation of the current trends, particularly expressed in the media and in news, there is little sense of hope in the sense of where are we going. But if you understand the living dynamics of our planets and the deeper basis for life that is truly life affirming, there is no doubt that this is a time of opportunity and of possibility. Doesn't mean it's not a time of threat. Education is clearly addressing this, needs to address it more. But this is the kind of thing that is coming out of this, I think, of 2022 as well, in particular. I wanted to just give a little story, and then I will pass it back so we can get more audience participation. One story that I heard recently is from an astronaut who, you know, the moonshot, being able to step back and see the entire planet and see, apparently, I have not had that privilege, except in some kind of, you know, experiences that are more spiritual, but being able to see that we are one on one planet, and we are truly interdependent. When you see the planet from afar, you don't see any boundaries. You don't see nations. You don't see even people arguing. You just see one breathing system. And what the astronaut, I wish I could remember his name, this particular astronaut, but what he was saying was that his impression when he saw that was, again, one of deep hope, because his sense from looking at the planet was that this is such a deep and whole system that our concerns about wars and about World Cups, important, but still, and about other things that are happening in a planet, in our human domain, are small. The deeper patterns of emergence are truly life-affirming, future-creating, and opportunity increasing. So not to let our fears of tomorrow take away our power for engaging in our dreams of today. And I think that is truly part of what education can address, and we're learning that it must address it too. So back to you, Kate.
Thank you, Alexander. And I also have a few thoughts, but I actually want to hear from our friends first, from our guests. Maybe you have also something to share on top, ideally, of what Shiv, Pavel, and Alexander already shared. What was important to you within your organization, within your community, in terms of the shaping and transforming the world of education in 2022? Maxima, I know that you need to leave soon, so maybe a few words from you.
Okay, yeah, because at 3:30 I had to go. I mean, I don't know, this year I was working with Sec Education Group, and I mean, I've seen lots of interest being put on transversal competences. I think more and more people are realizing that, you know, we need to, we need to invest in capacities for learning how to learn, and soft skills and capacities for, relating to one another, self-knowledge, etc. And then, I mean, my experience was, so I was hired during this year for trying to build an ecosystem. So I would say that my view was that learning ecosystems and the work of weaving was given some importance. But then, you know, I wasn't renovated on my contract. And I think it's also, to me, it was a way of realizing that we're still a long way to go. So the way I see it, I think the system is at a moment in which it understands that we need to go somewhere, and that there is a path to be taken to go there, but it's a long-term path, and we're still stuck in short-term fixes and short-term goals, and creating trust and investing in relationships and taking the time to to create the type of education that we want. Sometimes it's a leap when you are in a system where you have to be showing results all the time, and, you know, what's your KPI. So I don't know. I sense that, as you were all saying, we're in this time of, you know, the system can change, right? There may be a tipping point. I mean, I feel it in the world of social impact. I mean, all this big corporation has become increasingly popular, at least in Spain. So I think social impact I mean, I don't know how many people working in the social impact space and relating education for transformation or change maker. And I don't know whether it's just become something kind of I don't know, like a fashion. But I mean, I would say it's good that it's a fashion, because I mean, once it's popular to be, I don't know, vegetarian, and it's popular to be, you know, well, I guess it's better than, you know, if we compare some years ago to now. I think lots of good things have become as mainstream ideas, like gender equality, anti-racism. So there's lots of bad things happening in the world, but there's lots of things that have become normal that maybe 10 years ago it wasn't normal. It was kind of in the fringes. So I still think that a lot of people are just jumping into this car of being, you know, all these fancy words and, oh, I'm so responsible and I love social impact. And I wonder how much of it is true and authentic. And that's why organizations.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but sometimes it's like, you know, how they say, fake it until you make it.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're in that moment in which, you know, at least it's a good thing that it's, you know, everybody's talking about this, and well, let's see. I think we're almost there. So anyway, I'm sorry I have to leave early. Yeah, my dad is at the hospital. I have to go. But anyway.
It was great to see you, and
Yeah.
thank you for being part of this conversation today. But I think you also pick up the very important point of the social impact and impact in general, because I think the big piece of this connection between great theory and research and academically really advanced ideas and the practical implementation is still, the gap still is huge. It's getting closer, definitely, but the gap still is actually enormous. And especially when we can see it on the practical implementation of the topics such as, let's say, conflict management, conflict resolution, there can be amazing classes and courses on this. However, on practice, well, it's actually much harder to implement, you know, these ideas, not only from the big picture, but even in the example of the exact company, exact community, or even our own families, you know, our whole group of friends and communities and so on. Because this, when it's getting closer to not just academic ideas, but actually the world of human emotions, it's always getting sensitive. And I think we still have the long way to go on this emotional education, as well. And okay, maybe some of our guests, Olivier, maybe you want to say a few words from yourself from Learning Planet.
With pleasure. I've heard a lot of very interesting things, a lot of things that I am in the middle with a Learning Planet. When we launched Learning Planet in 2020, together with you, Katerina, and you, Pavel, we celebrated your birthday on the 25th of January, if I remember well. We had some first big conversation. I'm trying to see what has changed since then. One other thing you mentioning the gaps. I think something that we've been discussing a lot this year is bridging these gaps. I mean, the motto of a Learning Planet is learning to take care of oneself, others, and the planet, which is broadening the scope of education to very many issues around sustainability, around equity, around well-being. You mentioned the mental health crisis, and this is something that should be absolutely part of education also. How do we address this? So, but we participated in the Transforming Education Summit that Pavel mentioned in the UN in September, and this was for a whole week. And the following week, there was the Global Future Conferences organized by Arizona State University and other players. And in the first Transforming Education Summit, the subjects around climate and all these sustainability were very important, but the players were not really there. And in the following week in New York, everybody said education is at the core of the transformation that we have to do, but the education players weren't there. So I think one big thing that we see as essential is bridging the gap between all the challenges around the transition and sustainability and education. And our education systems today are not preparing the young people to understand and be equipped with all the skills, competencies to address the big challenges we have. So I think but what we see is that the conversation is happening. What I see also is that so many players, for a long time, education was kind of a boring subject, and you wouldn't be, if you were a social innovator, you wouldn't really be in education. Now, I don't know one social innovator who isn't dealing with education. So, and the Ashoka and Catalyst 230 and Bridge for Billions, everybody is having a look at this. So but how do we bridge the gap even more? A trend that I've seen recently is that we are trying with plenty of players to bring the higher education closer to the social impact. Today, they are quite separate worlds. How do we make sure that universities at the heart of cities, of regional learning ecosystems can play a role? How do we recognize the way that social entrepreneurs, young people in NGOs do learn? And how do we make sure that there's some kind of recognition, diplomas, certification, everything? So this is another trend that I find quite interesting. And I see new programs of universities targeting these young people, not only academic success or research, but really, how do we train and accompany in a lifelong way these people? And how do we make sure that the university can play a role which is not only academic and research excellency? So I think that's for higher education, that's quite interesting. And then something else, when we were together at home in January 2020, a couple of weeks later, there was a report published called A Future for the World Children. It was just before COVID. It was published by WHO, UNICEF, and The Lancet, and it gives the most catastrophic view of the health of our young generation today, worst situation since World War II. This was pre-COVID and pre the acceleration of the mental health crisis that we know. So since we've read this paper and we are partnered with the initiative that was born out of it called Children in All Policies, it's about how do we create a movement with youth and adults that will put the youth participation in public policies at the core of all our approaches. And I think this is absolutely key, and it's growing. We see the youth mobilization really being big, but also the big international UN organizations and others, and Club of Rome and OECD and others are really looking at this as being able to work with the youth and to co-design with them. And I think Gutierrez, the Secretary General of the UN, speech this year was about there are 4 ways to deal with youth. You don't listen to them, or you make as if you listen to them, you start doing so, or you really work with them to co-design the future. And I think we are in the 3rd phase. We have to go in the 4th one. And I'll finish on this is one concept that François, with whom I'm working, François Tadei, has come up because he was really thinking about citizenship and youth participation in citizenship and thinking, well, in a way, citizenship has always been an exclusive concept. At the beginning, when you came back to the origin of it in Athens, for example, it was fantastic with democracy and arts and culture and many things, but it was for rich men with arms, with weapons, okay? And it has been opening. Women are part of the citizens now in most part of the world, but it took quite a lot of time. But the children and part of the world, and all the natural world isn't. So we came up with this idea of planetizenship, and all of us being learning planetizens, which is citizens plus the youth plus all living species. And when we think of a world with this planetization approach, it is a shift that is interesting, and we see it. The UN are interested as well as young activists. And I think that these new kind of narratives, so that's maybe my response, we need to come up with some really ambitious new narratives for the future of learning. And we see this need emerging from very many different spaces. So I stop there.
Thank you, Olivier. It was very inspiring to be there with you 2 years ago, and it still is. And I think it's great that you continue moving toward this direction, and I can see how your words actually resonates with Alexander and Pavel and Chief, and I think all of the participants of our discussion. So, dear colleagues, do you want to make any comments on top of our guests, maybe ideas, or maybe some of our guests also would like to speak? Then please unmute yourself. Because if not, we would just move to the 2023. Yes, Adarsh, please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Namaste from India. And first of all, I like to wish you happy 2023 in advance to all of you. And I just want to mention the education is becoming global day by day, and online children are studying through Zooms, meetings, nets. But there is one thing that I want to mention. It may be sound stupid because some stress. Because if excess of anything, it is a famous quote, the excess of anything is like a poison in our life. So we should have to develop a system of education just like that, so that there is a balance between online and offline education, because the manners children learn from seeing the manners and from live actions from their eyes. Online education is good, but it should be in a limited way. I am not discussing it, but I am a supporter of a balanced way, so that children doesn't able to feel stress, because we know mental stress is one of the biggest problems of today's world, and many people know, and I am also experienced it. That's why I am explaining it, because if we don't counteract act on this issue, it will slowly become to damage our life physically and mentally. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Adarsh. I think it's a really valuable point, and we're definitely gonna explore it in our piece of conversation about the 2023. So actually, again, before we move to the future, is there something else which happened in 2022, very important for the global education conversation, but wasn't mentioned? Count 3 to 1. Okay, so let's move to the 2023 then. The same as with the first part of our conversation, we ask our respective audience first to share your ideas before actually we started this conversation. And actually, like our map is growing with ideas, which is also great. So let's see. So the question was, what topic is expected to be at the center of conversation about the future of education in 2023 from the perspective of our respective audience? And again, based on the content related, so to say, subjects, it was about the mindfulness, which we already mentioned during our conversation today, critical thinking, thriving, well-being, transparent leadership, peace education, global values, evolutionary intelligence. So we definitely, and yeah, actually integration, also solidarity of youth-led action, something that Olivier mentioned specifically, very important. So the format-related aspect, still about online and remote learning. Again, Adarsh just mentioned the importance of the balance in this topic. Continuing trend for use of artificial intelligence, gamification, flexible, dynamical frames of regulation, and some other technological aspect. And from the global trends and issues perspective, again, something that our audience shared in advance, we're going to explore on this more, decolonization of education and learning system. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen again and move back to our speakers. So Alexander, you would be the first one on this piece of the conversation. So what would be your main inspirations, your Delta Plus learning approach for the 2023?
Thank you so much, Kate. And let me start by saying this is so exciting, because again, this is the kind of thing that Global Education Futures has been engaging with and is at the heart of why we exist. I'm going to show you here this is in my office, and it's the poster that we produced about 10 years ago that projected from 2015 to 2035, what are the trends, what are the opportunities, what are the kind of objectives as well that we can see using a rapid foresight methodology to be able to explore these emerging patterns. This, again, is what Global Education Futures does and is dedicated to. So it's exciting to be able to share with you both what we have explored in the past year and now, using up my time, to explore what we are seeing as emerging challenges for the coming time. I want to start with exploring how one of the things that is coming clearly onto the scene is the complement between lifelong learning, where we're not looking only at pedagogy for young people, or as Malcolm Knowles talks about it, andragogy for adult learners. Different learning styles are needed. And then the pandragogy, which seems to seek to explore lifelong learning so that we don't give the incentives for students to get a degree and stop learning. Oh, you now have your degree, you're done. That is part of the old paradigm and it's very problematic. We need to be agile learners in today's day and world. So lifelong learning is one part, but the other part, something that Olivia and others have been mentioning, has to do with life-wide learning. Lifelong learning over time, life-wide learning is something UNESCO is looking into these days as well. How can we learn in all contexts, not just in the classroom, but we learn in all of our learning environments, and how can that be encouraged through our education systems? This has to do also with what Maximo was talking about in terms of learning how to learn. So that's one thing I wanted to share. The other has to do with the shift, a couple of things here, the shift from traditional brick and mortar schools with fixed learning environments such as classrooms and siloed subject matter courses with standardized kind of one-size-fits-all learning modalities. These are now being transcended from what has been the norm and that kind of focus into now more flexible learning environments. What are flexible learning environments? The more formal expression is in terms of learning communities. And these learning communities can be fostered through formal educational systems, but they thrive in life-wide learning contexts, in neighborhoods, in families, in cities, in the countryside, where one can learn all the time. So when you combine these kind of learning communities into communities of learning communities, you begin to foster learning ecosystems. This is core to what Global Education Futures is exploring as well. How do we create the conditions for learning communities to connect with each other and learn from each other? Then you can emerge the dynamics of learning ecosystems. So this is an art and a science that we are definitely exploring. It involves a couple of things, a mind shift. And the mind shift is away from that kind of siloed, separate, non-systemic, let me put it in the positive, the relational domain, the kind of what the systems thinking and systems being, systems sensing is offering and suggesting, being brought more into the educational frame. From the mindset, it also involves a new and different kind of skill set. And the skill set involves how do we cultivate each other's capacity to co-creatively emerge thriving environments, thriving living situations, thriving communities. And this orientation is part of the recognition that Shiv was also talking about earlier, that has to do with our interdependence and our the true interbeing that emerges from that kind of shift from mindset to skill set. And the key to this, something Olivia also touched on, is the heart set. Now, this is rarely taught in old-fashioned education systems, but it's becoming more and more relevant. The heart set, it's nothing set at all. It's flexible, it's dynamic, it's living, but it has to do with something that Adash was also mentioning, experiential learning, immersive learning. The heart set is based on the framing of education, empathy-based education. Empathy-based education. That is becoming more and more relevant, but we believe that this is going to be essential to education in the years to come. So the last things to wrap up here, and then I'll pass it back to you, Kate, is these kind of reorientation, these shifts, these minds, the shift in mindset, in skill set, and in heart set, lead us to the capacity to engage in what we talk about as full spectrum humaning. Full spectrum is the ability to understand that we need all different perspectives. We need what sometimes is referred to as unity and diversity, but unity is diversity. If you have only non-diversity in a unity, you do not have, you have a monolithic approach. Again, it's siloed. You don't have the requisite variety for thrivability. So understanding oneness, understanding, as Shiv was talking about in his talk and other framings, this is where we can bring this into an educational domain in the coming years to really focus on our oneness, not just the interdependence, which is a more technical term, but also the heartfelt sense of interbeing. And finally, the notion of, Olivia mentioned also the getting to the tipping points and becoming the trim tabs. Now, this is something, if we're not familiar with, is something we're exploring very actively in Global Education Futures. The trim tabs is that which begins the big motion, but isn't the big motion itself. It helps start the starter. It's like a starter engine for the car. Or the trim tab actually comes from aeronautics and navigation. But how can we be that small group that connects with each other and that helps stimulate bigger change? That is where the hope lies. That, I think, is truly the leverage points that we can explore together. Back to you, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexander. All what you said actually really resonates with me, and especially right now when I'm doing in the middle of my MBA program, myself, I'm hearing a lot this question, like, how hard is it actually for you to come back being a student, looking at my portfolio and so on. And I'm always smiling because, well, it's not hard of being back to be a student if you never stop being a student, actually. If you are living through this lifelong and life-wide learning, and if the whole idea that if you're learning something new, then you are try as hard and as much as possible to implement it on practice, because only when you're doing this, then you have new questions and you are going back to your educational practices, whenever formal, informal, community-based, and so on. This is the only way to live through this. Shiv, I agree with this. And what would be your main ideas for the 2023?
I think this discussion is so fascinating and so intriguing. I must say that it can go for another 2 hours, but just since we have an audience and we have to take care of time, so I feel that students in today's time, they are very restless. They are not willing to wait, and I think that will have a very, very important and critical impact on where education is heading. Whether in terms of, let's say, as a student, I want to get into startup ecosystem or entrepreneurship, I'm not willing to wait. Uh, I am looking at all those evaluations, valuations, P&L accounts, revenue, and this is across board. It is across the globe. If you see the entire tech sector, how the meltdown is happening, perhaps now is the time, and the 2023 and 2024, I would add one more year, will be extremely important years for an organization or a group like Jeff and all the friends who are sitting from different organizations to bring in more frameworks and tools which students and learners can refer to. Extremely important also because there is so much of ambiguity in how things are transforming and changing. So I think that's one important aspect where 2023 will be should be focusing upon. As a person who is a teacher at heart, I feel the discussion which has come towards multidisciplinary education, that's extremely very, very exciting for me as an individual, where I feel that the shift and this discussion has moved towards liberal arts education also, and that's perfectly fits in on the entire peace education, citizenship building. I think that's again a very, very important thing which is going to happen. Debundling of the courses, the curriculum, the programs is something which will continue, which had started few years back. I see more personalized learning which will be required, more personalized curriculum, content, pedagogy which will be required. Modular education is what something I call it. Lifelong learning, we have talked about it. The universities and institutions, they need to develop strategies, ideas, content, whatever we want to call it. And I would call it not just university, but perhaps university should be more called like engaged university. You have to work on all those ideas. How do you engage with students? Extremely important. It's going to play a role. One also important point, Kate, here is now as an educationist and the community, we should also be more discussing towards the economic shift which is happening across the globe, uh, because that will also give a direction to a learner and education as a system where which are the main policy level decisions which any government is taking. It becomes critical and crucial how we shape up the future of education. Now, one very interesting idea. I've been reading a book which is called The Tyranny of Merit. Uh, to what extent we are going to, give importance to merit is a very, very interesting book. It's by Mr. Sandel, Michael Sandel. So there's a one page where he talks about the concept of civic university. What we are seeing in today's time, all the conflict, the pandemic period, how people were taking care of each other, has the transformation happened from the heart? Is it like really inside? I started my talk by inside outside. Has the transformation really happened? It's important to introspect and reflect upon it. So I think in future, as a group, and I'm really fascinated by some of our friends who have joined from other organizations, to really think if an organization like Jeff and we can collaborate and think about having a civic university. Let's talk more about those humane aspects, that those human values. When I talk about education, there are 5 areas of development, right? Social, emotional, spiritual, physical, and cognitive, right? So somewhere all these 5 areas should go hands in hand, and that's where I think the future trend I can envisage. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you so much, Chef. Pavel, moving to you.
Thank you. So I'm going to touch on some things that my colleagues have not been elaborating, but I completely agree on what has been pointed out. So first thing, as you can see in our conversation today, we are highlighting the human aspects of the and social aspects of transformation of education much more than we do technological ones. However, technology has been indeed a driver in many of these disruptions that we are facing. And something very interesting happened in the last 2-3 months. So we saw the release of this new neural network called Midjourney, which actually disrupted the work of artists. Before this year, the idea was that creative professions is like a refugee space for humans. The idea was that machines can do a lot of technical stuff, but humans will always find, refuge in creativity. And some people still think that, but we need to rethink our idea of what creativity is, because now we have tools like Midjourney, and indeed we have ChatGPT, which is now able to produce most sophisticated texts based on prompts, which actually makes completely irrelevant the idea of essays. It has been the dominating way of testing student knowledge in colleges and universities. Now you just can produce enormous amounts of text and on the prompt. So, but that's just the beginning. Let's think 10 years into the future, we will see tools that are way, way more sophisticated. How can we get ready for that? I think this will be a big conversation in 2023. That's number one. Of course, related to that, another one is like long anticipated idea that metaverse is coming. And again, the potential of metaverse can be positive, but can be also disruptive to many ways of work. can be disruptive in terms of mental health. How do we distinguish between reality and virtual reality? So these things are still to be discovered, and this is something that we need to start looking into. And one of the things that we as Global Education Futures have been exploring is the idea of future skills. So how do we proactively prepare to that future transformation that is coming up? And the good news is I can see this really enters into political decision making. So I've just been to a project in Saudi Arabia, for example, where this is going to be one of the staples of the decision making for the government educational policies. How are educational programs future ready? And not only Saudi Arabia, I can see it in many other locations that people start to recognize we cannot respond to challenges reactively anymore, because transformation comes really fast. We need to respond to them proactively. Coupled with that is another topic that I feel is extremely important and now gets into mainstream. Just two days ago, a very historical agreement has been signed that maybe is more important than any climate agreement signed so far. It's an agreement to keep the commitment that governments of the world will keep biodiversity, and we'll work on recreating biodiversity. And if we think about the climate summit that just happened about a month ago in Sharm el-Sheikh, I'm just miles away from that location, and the biodiversity summit in Canada. This conversation is about how do we change the ways we are living, the ways we are working, to safeguard the planet, to align with planetary systems beyond human systems. That has not been an agenda maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We were only focusing on technological transformation, digital transformation. Now people start to recognize that we need to create a regenerative economy worldwide. It's a big transformation, much bigger than digital transformation. It's coming our way. And to come to that transformation, we need to bring new skills. That's where the conversation about future skills becomes so essential. Last but not least, I feel that this topic that Olivier highlighted is going to be very big in next year. It's about voice of youth. It's about participatory, public participation in decision-making, but more so, participation in design of learning experiences, participation in design of learning systems. So some of our colleagues, some of people that are listening to us right now are working on this type of initiatives, that we need to bring voice of youth into decision-making space, but also in the educational space more actively. I think this will be a really hot topic in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. And I think what you said also really resonates with Alexander's point about the connectivity between skill set and mindset, because the same applies to the future skills and in some form future mindset. Because as we all know, well, for sure, I know this from my experience in WorldSkill that, as I said in the research, you need at least 10,000 hours to master even one skill. So for most of the time, the motivation why to master the skills is clear, is to then sell it. Basically, you master some skill and then you can use it. Well, probably also can lose it. Yeah, use it to gain some additional value for yourself, for the community, and so on. But what would motivate you to change your mindset? Because nobody can put, significant effort to master a skill if the initial transformation in mindset isn't happening. And I think it's also important point from your piece and Alexander piece, how to move towards this direction as well. Okay, guys, let's also hear from our audience. Please unmute yourself. Again, Olivier, maybe from the learning plan perspective, your own perspective, some ideas for the 2023, we would really love to hear it.
I've been very inspired by everything I've heard again. Maybe something I want to share with you. Last year in the Learning Planet Festival, I was in a session with Melati Vajan, who's a young social entrepreneur. She started a banning plastic bag campaign when she was 12 years old with her sister in Bali. Now she's in her 22s and she's leading Youthtopia, which is a platform where she helps other young game changers to learn how to become an activist, how to have impact. And I asked her, but what should be education? What is education for you? How should it change? And she said, oh, I have a to-do list. And I think that it should be 4 different things. It should be youth-led. So the youth participation, again, is very important. Nature-inspired. We can only protect what we know well. And so that was another point. Solution-orientated, because the young generation needs to be able to handle this, and much more in a team and project and collaborative dimension. So I hope I'm being true to what she said, but I think these dimensions are absolutely key to me. And then maybe wanted to build up on what Shiv has been sharing on the meritocracy aspect. I met at Dartington Hall a friend called Alan Bolden that some of you know. I was there in July, and we met with the daughter of Michael Young. And Michael Young was a great innovator in many dimensions, and he wrote a dystopia, probably in the 30s, if I remember well, about meritocracy and how horrible the world would be if it was a meritocratic world. And in fact, it has shifted, and meritocracy is seen even by some very progressive people as a core, strong dimension of education. But the narrative is about individual success, people who are successful, do a career, have professional success, and this kind of thing. And I think this narrative is probably not the one we need again. So a narrative where we look at working as team and having collective success, to me, is very important. I have plenty of examples of schools around the world. One of them I will share is Collège Quatre-Pressoir in Haiti, where the children, very young, after 4 years of schooling, start working as teams with their teacher to solve real-world problems about water pollution, about agriculture, regenerative agriculture, about so many, preventing seism, things which are sometimes complex. By doing so, by being truly passionate about what they learn in a collective way, they also get the best kind of grades in international competition for chemistry or mathematics, because they have been so passionate about what they learn that is going to serve their community. That's a very strong civic dimension. But they also are excellent in the academic discipline. But this was not painful, or maybe it was hard and things like this. But so simply, and I've run a network of 30 schools at one point where our starting point was everyone in the classroom is going to succeed. And you are going to succeed because you're going to help each other. And then everybody does succeed. And you don't need the meritocracy with only a few. I mean, everyone will succeed in a different way later on. But in the way we bring up the kids, how do they work together, and how do we value not only the individual success, but also the impact and the collective success? This is something that I'm very interested in.
Thank you, Olivier. Any other comments on this piece of the 2023 before I'm actually going to move to my final question and to show the final map that we have? If no, that I would like to ask our speakers the very short final question. Basically, it would be great if in the end of this conversation, after picking up all of these ideas, unpacking this challenging aspects, but also inspirational one, you can name one your personal, but of course from the perspective of the global education future community, and the bigger picture, kind of your main priority to the 2023, and maybe name one particular practical project to which you can potentially invite our guests, our audience, our viewers to join, because we are very open community. We're encouraging engagement, and our contact information is available. So to actually put everything, or at least something that we discussed today, on practice, what would be your call shortly for the next year to our audience? The order here is really not so important. Shiv, maybe you're going to be first this time.
Great, thanks. So one idea which we have been discussing from Global Education Future side, we have had few rounds of discussion, and I would love to engage with our friends who are there on this group. So all of us, we are connected here from different parts of the world, and collectively, if I have to add the years of experience, perhaps more than 250 years of experience we would have in this room, right? I feel that personally through Jeff, what I will be driving is have a digital academy for future human development, which will have 3 important components. One will be for that those small short courses for personal professional development. Second will be also to engage with the educators, important pillars of the education fraternity. And then third, perhaps may have some bridge courses, which will be mix of both education and skills. So I see this as a personal project which I'll be driving, of course, through Jeff, which will be called Jeff. We can think of a name, Kit. So Jeff Digital Future Digital Academy sort of thing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you. I would like to address this in terms of what we can do at the very personal level, personally, what we can do every day in every connection. So there are different levels of engagement, but we can't be bystanders. That's my message. That part of this is to think about how we carry in us this momentum from what we have been talking about in this bifurcation point from the past, the kind of things we have covered here, what you're going to see in a moment that we're mapping out, and how we are bringing that actively in our own ways of being into the future. We are learning all the time with others, with whoever we interconnect. How do we either stimulate or cut off learning opportunities by the ways we are in groups and with other individuals? And I would also suggest two other things. To do this, that is partly really an introspective questions of embodiment and enacting of being yourself a learning system. But key to that is being a connected learning system. It's not enough to be on your own and walk around and connect with your world in a silo kind of way, just you reaching out. But you need to invite the conversation for action in your organizations, in your classrooms, in your families and community. So this is about connecting, only connect. That's key. And finally, it's that old admonition from Mahatma Gandhi, who is claimed to have said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So I would like to bring this into something that we often say here is in Global Education Futures is, be the educational systems you wish to see in the world. How do you embody and enact the educational systems you want to see, and not just talk about them or ask others to do it? How are you contributing to the dynamics of this emergence? Those are the things I'm wishing to take forward in my own questioning of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Pavel?
Yeah, wonderful. And let me pick up on that. And also, interestingly, I thought the three initiatives that I keep having in mind are the ones that I expect to hopefully present in the learning plan space in more details at the end of January and during the Learning Plan Festival. And one of them is actually something related to what Alexander has just been talking. And it's related also to the mission of our colleagues at Learning Planet, is how do we create a movement of learning innovators worldwide, learning not just for traditional purposes, but learning for sake of the future, all those transformations we're talking about. And how can we make it viral? How can we make it into a genuine movement, into something that would inspire a lot of people, will put them on board, and begin spreading around the world? And that's something we want to explore in 2023 and prototype more and more. The second question related to that is the topic that Olivia indicated as the idea of planetizenship, the idea of belonging to the planet, or we sometimes say citizens of the planet. To be citizens of the planet, we cannot just be, recognizing, okay, we are living in the borderless world. It's more than that. It's taking responsibility for being part of the planet, being part of modern human world. How can we make that real? How can we learn for that? And for that, we are envisaging a project that we call University for the Planet, something where we can create a network of participatory spaces worldwide where people are going to learn in new ways, and not only learn, but also create new ways of being. And that is something that we're going to explore in 2023 and beyond. Last but not least, I mentioned the topic of learning for world peace. And that is something we are working on as Global Education Futures, and we've been working through 2022 in actually asking a bold question. Can we discover a pathway to the world without wars? Like, is it possible? Can we create in the next half a century a society which wouldn't require military conflicts at all? And actually the question is, either we find that way, or we, as Buckminster Fuller said, we will become obsolete as human beings, because the lethality of wars is increasing. Chances that, like say, in the next 50 years, we will see a large-scale conflict that will lead to the eradication of human race is now very high. So we need to take that risks very seriously, and we need to start thinking about how do we evade from that doomsday scenario? How do we deviate from that? And the answer is we need to deviate from it by mobilizing collective action and by learning to live differently. And so that has been the focus of our exploration in 2022. That will be the work that we want to bring into reality in 2023. So these are my 3 invitations, and more to come in a month from now in the Learning Planet Festival.
Thank you, Pavel. Alexander, do you want to comment on this?
Just a quick question for Pavel. In terms of the theme for this conversation, which is hope and transmuting crisis into opportunity, what you were just talking about is a big challenge. How do you see that, just briefly?
But that's exactly my point, Alexander. Is actually when we started the exploration, for example, of this possibility of creating a society that doesn't require wars, the first thing we discovered is actually that to move there, we need to admit this possibility. Actually, if we don't admit it, we will not get there. So hope is the basis of the transition. So unless we create that hope, we build that hope within, or in the old days, it was also called belief. And in Christianity, in the New Testament, one of the words of Jesus is that if you have a grain of belief that is as small as the seed of mustard tree, which is really, really small one, right? Small grain, you already can move mountains. So that is like a message which we keep on rediscovering for last several millennia, that if we have that grain of hope or believe in the future, that is something that produces the possibility for a totally different world.
Thank you, Pavel. And as I can see, the very live, very vibrant discussion happening in our chat, I would also love to give the 2 minutes time to Mikhail and Olivier to share your plans for 2023. Mikhail, do you want to say a few words, or if you don't, we will then kind of put this as a note to this conversation, but if you would like, please.
Yes, I'm already going to try to connect with a few global initiatives that are in the same field related. What Dragolino Science Quests, not only for kids, does is it deals with kids as teams, in the way it was described by Olivier. It does the same with students, and it does the same with the education of adults, and it is planned to start from Germany, because here we have a wonderful funding possibility which has to be explored a bit, because the people that did invent that law forgot to tell all about the opportunities connected with this law, and it shall bring up to 20,000 euro even for students and pupils who work in teams, and for adults also, a year netto for brutto. Yes, so that's an idea to get funding from Germany through the European Union. And of course, Olivier, I will get in touch with you. And that's something that is going to, to deepen now in the next 2 or 3 months. We want to start in April. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikhail. Olivier, so the Learning Planet Festival in the beginning of the year always was my favorite educational event. So a few words about this and some of your other plans for 2023.
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you, Ekaterina. At the time being, I'm scarcely ever have time even to join a meeting like this one, so I'm very happy to be with you, because indeed we are preparing the festival. Last year we had 500 events organized by 250 partner organizations, taking place in person in Minneapolis, in Delhi, in Afghanistan, even in Paris, in so many places, and online. So it's a very hybrid festival. This year again, I think it will be around the same size of festival, but I think the quality of the formats that are happening is great. We have hackathons with team of social entrepreneurs for environment taking place all over the world, thanks to, I don't know, our friend Kenneth Kwok, who did it last year with Asian countries. Now he's coming to Paris and organizing it broadly. We have a DICE in India doing some Model UN on planetizenship. So Model UN sessions to reinvent the idea of planetism done by young people. We have conferences and things like this. We are looking forward to Pavel's series of proposals for sessions. You are still invited. If you want to organize a session during the festival, you can still do it until the 12th of January. Submit something. It's quite simple to submit an event, and for sure to join the conference. So I guess this is the core focus that I have all the time now. Maybe because we talked about hope at the beginning, something we'll be doing, and Pavel is also invited to join the session, is we are doing an imagination in the classroom program with partners in Australia called AIM. AIM means love in French, but it is Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience. They are great. They are in 52 countries, and we're going to push for a big international program on bringing back, maybe not hope, but imagination in the classroom as a power for change. So that's one thing, but we will have a series of imagination TV sessions on peace building, on education in the margins, focusing on refugees, notably, on different kinds of subjects every morning during the festival. So I can't tell you the whole program. It's quite complex to navigate, but we're still working on making plenty of tracks and easy ways of navigating the program in French, in English, in Romanian, in Spanish, mainly French and English, but really looking forward to seeing you there.
Thank you so much, Olivier.
24th of January, yeah. 24th of January is International Day of Education.
Yay, we all know that. While the reason why I'm sharing the the map right now is because one of our ideas actually within the JEF is to make this conversation an annual tradition in the end of the year, in the end of the December. So probably this is, of course, it's super raw. It's just something that was created literally during our conversation. So do not judge it roughly, but this is something from which we're hoping to start our conversation next year, actually, and to see what kind of projects actually we were able to implement, what kind of trend gets stronger, what kind of trend actually changes, hopefully for the better. And yeah, so we're really hoping to see you all within a year, and hopefully in the much more positive, better, more kind world. Any final remarks?
I just wanted to ask
just a point.
Just about the chart, Paul. Is there going to be a chance for people to receive the chart, to see the results? How is that going to be shared with people?
I think we definitely can add some touch to it, just to make it kind of less raw, more well-shaped, so to say, and then just send to our respective participants. I think it's not going to be a problem. Yeah, it's not a secret.
And we're hoping to put it into our newsletter as well. So That's something which will be coming out. Shiv, you want to mention that quick? And then over to
Yeah,
you,
so
Pavel. Sorry.
just to all the audience, we have also started collecting all our learning from such conversations in a newsletter format. So what Kate was sharing, and thank you, Kate, for such a, I would say, insightful map you have created out of the conversation. So this will also be part of the newsletter. What the team will be sending it across to all of you. Will also be through newsletter you can register to get constant updates from Jeff for all such sessions in the future also. So yeah, just wanted to mention that. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Alexander. Yeah.
And maybe one last more technical comment from me is that we definitely want to see you sooner than in a year from now, because we will continue these type of talks, and they will happen next month, and the next few months will be rich in terms of different conversations we want to have or with you in different contexts. So please stay tuned.
Totally. Thank you so much, everybody, to join. It was a big pleasure to see you. Have a very happy festive season ahead of you. As Pavel said, looking forward to see you during the Jeff Talks next year. And yeah, let's have a good new year. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye, everyone.
friends, and
Everyone.
namaste.
Thank
Bye.
you.
And namaste. Goodbye.